Welcome to this week's lecture on meeting the needs of all learners. This week we focus on diversity in the classroom, gifted, special needs, English language learners, and learning style. But first, I read aloud. The white shape silhouetted against a blue background changes on every page. Is it a rabbit, a bird, an ice cream cone, or just spilt milk? In this childhood classic, kids are kept guessing until the surprise ending, and they're encouraged to improvise similar games of their own. This classic was one of the first books to introduce non-representational art to children. It represents one of the finest picture book examples of abstract art and participatory text. It is a renowned American classic that continues to engage young readers with its absolute graphic strength and verbal dialogue between craftsman and child. It Looked Like Spilt Milk by Charles G. Shaw. Sometimes it looked like spilt milk, but it wasn't spilt milk. Sometimes it looked like a rabbit, but it wasn't a rabbit. Sometimes it looked like a bird, but it wasn't a bird. Sometimes it looked like a tree, but it wasn't a tree. Sometimes it looked like an ice cream cone, but it wasn't an ice cream cone. Sometimes it looked like a flower, but it wasn't a flower. Sometimes it looked like a pig, but it wasn't a pig. Sometimes it looked like a birthday cake, but it wasn't a birthday cake. Sometimes it looked like a sheep, but it wasn't a sheep. Sometimes it looked like a great horned owl, but it wasn't a great horned owl. Sometimes it looked like a mitten, but it wasn't a mitten. Sometimes it looked like a squirrel, but it wasn't a squirrel. Sometimes it looked like an angel, but it wasn't an angel. Sometimes it looked like spilt milk, but it wasn't spilt milk. It was just a cloud in the sky. Let's begin by defining diverse learners. Diverse learners are students from different backgrounds that include, but are not limited to, cultural, linguistic, and racial or ethnic minorities, learning, emotional, or social disability, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning. The U.S. Department of Education defines diverse learners as students with disabilities, English language learners, migrant students, homeless children and youth, neglected and delinquent children and youth, Indian, Native Hawaiian, and Alaskan Native children and youth, and rural students. You will find a wide variety of diverse needs in today's classrooms. Differing learning styles, different intelligences, hidden or invisible disabilities, learning disabilities, attention deficit, behavior disorders, mild cognitive disabilities, Asperger's syndrome, sensory and physical disabilities, which are often visible, blind, deaf, cerebral palsy, religious and cultural differences, socioeconomic differences, second language learners, talented and gifted learners, and other differences. One of the first things we need to learn is to use people-first language. This is language to use when referring to a person who has a disability. A disability is a condition someone has, not is. So use has, not is, and put the person first. If not necessary, don't even refer to the disability. Doug has a learning disability. Doug has autism. Accessible, not handicapped. uses a wheelchair, not confined to a wheelchair or wheelchair bound. Mental disability or cognitive disability, not retarded. Learning style, or how one learns best, is influenced by psychological factors such as left-right brain, reflective or impulsive, analytic or global, sensory preferences, auditory, visual, tactile, kinesthetic, physical needs. Are you mobile or are you static? Are you a morning person or an afternoon person? Do you eat or not eat when you're learning something? So intake or non-intake? The environment, do you like it light or dark? Cool or warm? Some sound or absolute quiet? Formal setting, informal setting? Social groupings, do you work alone or in a group? Work with authority present or not present? And attitudes, internal or external motivation, and persistence. Sensory preferences. Tactile learners need to touch and manipulate items related to the lesson. Kinesthetic learners need to move and engage their whole bodies during learning and practice activities. As they move in conjunction with learning, they internalize information they're working with. Visual learners need to see things to truly grasp them, and auditory learners like to hear information. This matches traditional classrooms. Knowing and appealing to diverse learning styles results in increased comfort level for students, increased achievement, increased self-esteem, and less behavioral problems. Howard Gardner developed the theory of multiple intelligences. He said that several distinct forms of intelligence each of us possess in varying degrees. The first is linguistic, the capacity to use words effectively. Logic, mathematical, ability to use numbers. Spatial, perceive visual spatial world, line, color, shape, form, space, and their relationships. Bodily kinesthetic, using your whole body to express ideas and feelings, or using hands to produce or transform things. Musical, to perceive, discriminate, transform, or express musical forms. Interpersonal, perceive and make distinctions in moods, intentions, and feelings of others. Intrapersonal, self-knowledge and ability to act based on that knowledge. Naturalist, knowledge of the natural world, plants, animals, geology, etc. Gardner believed that intelligence is defined too narrowly. He says that traditional IQ tests are based on two intelligences, the linguistic and the logical mathematical, and traditional school is based on these as well. The result is that the needs of many with other intellectual strengths are not met. So now we're going to look at differentiated instruction. If you expect 25 bright, clean, smiling faces of children who all get it at the same time and in the same way, you're in for a shock. Differentiated instruction, or the process of teaching that assumes that there will be differences in the abilities, interests, and learning styles of students, resulting in the teacher proactively planning multiple paths to learning to meet those differences, not 25 different plans, rather 2 to 4 learning options. The teacher doesn't wait for students to struggle. The teacher proactively plans to meet those differences. It is not a case of treating all students equally. Equality does not equal justice. It is a case of doing what is fair, giving each student what she or he needs in order to succeed. This is being fair, is justice. Here is a cartoon that says it all when it comes to why being equal is not fair to all students. For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. So what does research say about differentiated instruction? Differentiated instruction is the result of a synthesis of a number of educational theories and practices. Brain research indicates that learning occurs when the learner experiences moderate challenge and relaxed alertness or readiness. Psychological research reveals that when interest is tapped, learners are more likely to find learning rewarding and become more autonomous as a learner. So here are some examples. Based on readiness or abilities, differentiated content in reading, leveled readers for some, novels for others, audiobooks for others. Based on interests or differentiated product in reading, draw a cartoon, write a poem, write a description, or write a story. And based on learner profiles, differentiate the process in reading, language experience story, a read aloud, a shared reading, guided reading, or independent reading. So is differentiated instruction new? No. Far from it. Think to the one-room schoolhouses. Contemporary approach that is shaped by best practices in special education, best practices in gifted education, best practices in multi-age classrooms, and research on the brain and multiple intelligences. A teacher's response to learners needs to be guided by general principles of differentiated instruction, respectful tasks, flexible grouping, continual assessment, clear learning goals, and appropriate degrees of challenge. Teachers differentiate through content, process, and product based upon student readiness, interests, and learning styles. The teacher is clear about what matters in subject matter. The teacher understanding, appreciates, and builds upon student differences. Assessment and instruction are inseparable. The teacher adjusts content, process, and product in response to student readiness, interests, and learning profile. All students participate in respectful work. Students and teachers are collaborators in learning. The goals of a differentiated classroom are maximum growth and individual success. Flexibility is the hallmark of a differentiated classroom. In a differentiated classroom, assessment information is more useful to a teacher than grades. Assessment drives instruction. Assessment information helps the teacher map next steps for varied learners and the class as a whole. Teachers assess student readiness, interests, and learning profiles. Assessments are part of teaching for success. Assessment occurs consistently as the unit begins, throughout the unit, and as the unit ends. Pre-assessment, formative, and summative assessment are regular parts of the teaching learning cycle. Assessment itself may be differentiated. Assessment information helps students chart and contribute to their own growth. And assessment is more focused on personal growth than on pure competition. Flexible grouping. Students are part of many different groups and also work alone based on the match of the task to student readiness, interest, or learning style. Sometimes students select work groups and sometimes teachers select them. Sometimes students' group assignments are purposeful and sometimes they're random. Teachers may create skills groups that are heterogeneous or homogeneous in readiness level. So what are some of the ways we can differentiate reading instruction? reading partners and reading buddies. Read, summarize, read, question, answer. Create a visual organizer or summarize. Parallel reading with a teacher prompt. Choral reading, antiphonal reading. Flip books. Split journals, double entry or triple entry journals, and books on tape. We can also differentiate reading instruction by creating a tape that has highlights on it, cliff notes, note-taking organizers, a variety of texts on the same topic, a variety of supplementary materials on the same topic, highlighted texts, and think, pair, share, or preview, mid-view, and post-view activities. We can differentiate the process. We can have games. We can do cubing. We can have choices based on intelligences. We can have centers. We can have tiered lessons. And we can use contracts. To develop a tiered lesson, select the activity organizer. So is it going to be organized by concept or generalization? Think about your students and use of assessments. So readiness range, their interests, their learning profile, their talents. Create an activity that is interesting, high level, causes students to use key skills to understand the key ideas. Chart the complexity of the activity. Choose the activity along the ladder as needed to ensure challenge and success for your students in a variety of ways, and then match the task to student based on student profile and task requirements. You can design a learning contract. So a learning contract contains a skills component, and it focuses on skills-based tasks. The assignments are based on pre-assessment of students' readiness, and students work at their own level and pace. It has a content component. The focus is on applying, extending, or enriching key concepts or ideas and understandings. It requires sense-making and production, and the assignment is based on readiness or interests. A timeline. The teacher sets a completion date and check-in requirements, and students select order of work except for required meetings and homework. And then the agreement. The teacher agrees to let students have freedom to plan their time. Students agree to use the time responsibly. Guidelines for working are spelled out. Consequences for ineffective use of freedom are delineated. And signatures of the teacher, student, and parent, if appropriate, are placed on the agreement. There are several ways that we can differentiate product. Choices based on readiness, interest, and learning profile. Setting clear expectations, setting timelines, setting agreements, having product guides, having rubrics, and evaluations. We end this week with a teacher cartoon. One teacher to another. Sometimes I'm not sure if they have a learning disability or I have a teaching disability. Have a good week.